There's a prison you'll never escape from. If you don't recognize, you're locked inside it. It has no visible bars. It has no armed guards. It has no walls you can touch. But it's the most effective prison ever built. Because you built it yourself. You maintain it yourself. And worse still, you defend your own right to remain in it. That prison is your emotions. And every day you live obeying how you feel. Every decision you make based on whether you feel like it or not. Every action you postpone because you're not motivated. You're adding another lock to your own cell. The Stoics saw this with devastating clarity 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the known world, wrote something that should shake anyone who reads it honestly. You have power over your mind, not external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But most people completely invert that equation. They try to control everything outside themselves: circumstances, people, outcomes. Meanwhile, they surrender total control over the only thing they can actually control: their internal response, their decision to act or not act, their choice to obey their feelings or command them. Every morning, you wake up and your mind immediately begins its negotiation work. It presents you with a complete list of reasons why today isn't a good day to do what you promised to do. You're tired. The weather isn't ideal. You don't feel motivated. You have too much to do. So better do nothing. You need to rest a bit more. You can start tomorrow when you're more prepared. And if you listen to that voice, if you negotiate with that weak part of you, you've already lost. You didn't just lose that day. You trained your brain in the pattern of surrender. You taught it that feelings are the boss. And you're the employee who follows orders. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming the philosopher who taught emperors, understood slavery in a way most will never understand. And he taught something radical: that you can be physically free but mentally enslaved, or physically chained but internally free. The difference isn't in your external circumstances. It's in whether you obey your emotional impulses, or whether you observe them without being controlled by them. The free man isn't someone who can do what he wants. He's someone who can do what he must do, regardless of what he wants in the moment. Modern culture has sold you a dangerous lie: that you should honor your feelings, that you should listen to your body, that you should respect your emotional boundaries. All that sounds compassionate and healthy, but it's poison disguised as medicine. Because your feelings aren't designed to direct your life. They're designed to react to immediate stimuli with the sole objective of keeping you comfortable and safe in the short term. Your feelings don't have long-term vision. They don't have ambition. They don't have integrity. They only have one mission: minimize discomfort right now, regardless of the future cost. When you feel lazy and obey by staying in bed, your feelings won and your future lost. When you feel fear and obey by avoiding necessary action, your feelings won and your potential shrank. When you feel resistance to difficult work and obey by distracting yourself with easy pleasure, your feelings won and your character weakened. Every victory of your feelings is a defeat of your will. And after enough defeats, your will doesn't even try to fight. It surrenders by default. You live completely at the mercy of emotional states that fluctuate moment to moment, according to stimuli you don't control. Seneca observed something brutal about this condition. It's not that we have little time, it's that we waste a lot. And the primary way we waste time is waiting to feel ready, waiting for motivation that never comes, waiting for the day when we finally have no fear, no doubt, no resistance. That day never comes. Because negative feelings don't disappear before action. They disappear during action. They dissolve when you act despite them. But if you wait for them to go away before acting, you'll wait eternally while your life evaporates in endless postponement. Look around you. You'll see people trapped in jobs they hate because they feel afraid to change. You'll see bodies deteriorating because people don't feel like training. You'll see relationships dying because no one feels the motivation to do the difficult work of real communication. You'll see dreams abandoned because people didn't feel enough confidence to try. In every case, the feeling dictated the decision. And the result is a wasted life, unrealized potential, regret accumulating year after year. Marcus Aurelius faced this battle every day. With absolute power, he could have indulged every impulse, every desire, every feeling of laziness or easy pleasure. No one would have questioned him. But he imposed brutal discipline on himself because he understood something fundamental. That character isn't built in moments of comfort. It's built specifically in the moments where you feel like giving in but choose not to. Every time you act against a weak impulse, you forge strength. Every time you obey that impulse, you create weakness. The question you must ask yourself with devastating honesty is this: how many important decisions in your life have you made based on how you felt in the moment, instead of on what you knew was the right thing to do? How many opportunities did you lose because you didn't feel brave enough? How many destructive habits do you maintain because they feel comfortable? How many goals did you abandon because the path felt too difficult? If you answer honestly, you'll probably discover that your feelings have directed your life far more than your reason has. Epictetus taught his students a simple but transformative exercise. When you feel a strong impulse toward any action, especially one you know doesn't serve you, pause. Don't act immediately. Observe the impulse as you would observe a passing cloud. Acknowledge that it's there. Feel its intensity. But don't obey it automatically. In that space between impulse and action, in that conscious pause, resides all your human freedom. That's where you can choose. That's where you're truly free. But most people never create that space. Impulse and action are fused in a single automatic process. They feel hunger and eat even though it's not time. They feel boredom and seek distraction even though they have important work. They feel fear and avoid even though they should confront. There's no moment of conscious choice. There's only automatic reaction to feelings. They live like animals operating by instinct, instead of like humans capable of reason. Seneca wrote something that should be engraved in the mind of anyone who wants to live free. Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Not begin when you feel ready. Not begin when you have motivation. Begin immediately. Because every day you postpone, living according to your principles instead of according to your feelings, is a day lost forever. And at the end of your life, you won't have another chance. You'll only have the count of how many days you actually lived versus how many days you simply reacted to impulses. The 10 truths we'll explore aren't abstract philosophical theory. They're brutally honest observations about how human beings function, validated by 2,000 years of Stoic practice and confirmed by modern neuroscience. Each truth will expose a lie you've probably been believing. Each truth will show you exactly how your emotions keep you locked up. and each truth will give you a specific tool to begin freeing yourself. This won't be comfortable. Truth rarely is. Honestly confronting how much control you've surrendered to your feelings is painful. Seeing with clarity how many decisions you've made from emotional weakness instead of rational strength hurts. Recognizing that you've been a voluntary prisoner of your own mind is humiliating. But that pain, that humiliation, that uncomfortable recognition is exactly the admission price to real freedom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, "At dawn, when you have difficulty getting up, have this thought ready. I rise to do the work of a human being. Not I rise if I feel rested. Not I rise when my motivation arrives. I rise because I'm human, and humans work." Feelings don't get a vote in that decision. It's a decision already made based on identity, not on temporary emotion. Before continuing, you need to make a specific declaration, not a private thought you forget tomorrow, a public declaration that creates accountability. Go to the comments and write exactly this. My emotions no longer decide for me. I decide. Those words are your recognition that you've seen the prison, that you've admitted you've been locked up, and that you've decided that freedom is worth more than the comfort of remaining a prisoner. Do it now. Pause. Go to the comments. Write, my emotions no longer decide for me. I decide. That act of declaration makes your commitment real in a way that private thinking never achieves. The Stoics understood the power of public vows. They knew that declaring your intention externally dramatically increases the probability of fulfilling it internally. What follows are the 10 truths that no prisoner wants to hear, but that every prisoner needs if they want to escape. Each truth is a key that opens a specific lock on your cell. Each truth will expose the specific mechanism through which your emotions control you. And each truth will give you a concrete practice to take control back. It won't be easy. But freedom never is. It's only absolutely necessary if you want to live as a human instead of as a slave to your own impulses. This is your moment. Not in a week when you feel more prepared. Not next month when circumstances are better. Now, with the mind you have, with the feelings that are trying to convince you to postpone, with the resistance you're feeling at this precise moment, that's exactly the moment where freedom begins. Not when resistance disappears, but when you act despite it. First, Stoic truth. Your feelings are professional liars that keep you enslaved. There's a lie you've probably believed your entire life, that your feelings tell you the truth about reality. That if you feel fear, there's real danger. That if you feel lazy, you need rest. That if you feel doubt, you're not prepared. That if you feel resistance, it's not the right time. But your feelings aren't honest reporters of reality. They're aggressive salespeople trying to convince you to buy comfort right now, regardless of the future cost. And they're extraordinarily good at their job because they've been practicing your entire life. Marcus Aurelius understood this with a clarity most never reach. He wrote, "Everything you hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything you see is a perspective, not the truth." And he applied this especially to his own feelings. When he felt fear before a difficult decision, he didn't assume the fear meant real danger. He recognized it was just a signal that he was leaving his comfort zone. When he felt resistance to necessary work, he didn't interpret that as a sign the work was wrong. He saw clearly it was his weak part trying to negotiate surrender. The first lie your feelings tell you is this: if you don't feel good, something's wrong. That lie is particularly effective because it sounds reasonable, but it's false in contexts of growth. When you're growing, when you're developing discipline, when you're building character, you won't feel good. You'll feel uncomfortable. And that discomfort isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that something's working. It's evidence that you're expanding your limits. But your feelings will interpret that discomfort as a problem that must be solved by returning to familiar comfort. Epictetus taught his students something radical: that you shouldn't trust your initial impressions of things. That the first emotional reaction you have to any situation is usually incorrect because it's based on past conditioning, not on rational evaluation of the present. You feel anxious before an important presentation, and your mind interprets that anxiety as, "I'm not prepared, I should cancel." But anxiety doesn't mean lack of preparation. It means it matters enough for your nervous system to be alert. The correct interpretation is, "This is important, I must be present," not, "This is dangerous, I must flee." The second devastating lie your feelings sell you is, "If you wait to feel ready, then you'll be ready." Thousands of people postpone necessary action waiting for the magical day when they'll finally feel prepared, motivated, confident. But that day doesn't exist. Feelings of readiness don't precede action, they follow action. You feel confident after having acted courageously, repeatedly, not before. You feel prepared after having started and progressed, not before starting. Waiting for feelings of readiness before acting guarantees you'll never act. Seneca observed this in his own life and in the lives of the people he counseled. It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare. It's because we don't dare that they're difficult. When you feel something is impossibly difficult and use that feeling as a reason not to try, you've fallen into the perfect trap. Because you'll never discover if it really was as difficult as it felt from the outside until you try. And in most cases, the real difficulty is a fraction of the felt difficulty. Your feelings magnify obstacles to protect you from discomfort, but in doing so, they keep you small. The third lie is perhaps the most insidious. Your feelings are you. This is complete identification with emotional states. I'm an anxious person. I'm lazy by nature. I'm not a morning person. Each of those statements treats temporary feelings or habitual patterns as if they were permanent identity. But you aren't your feelings. You're the consciousness that observes those feelings. You're the capacity to choose whether you act on them or not. When you identify completely with your feelings, you lose all the distance necessary to evaluate them critically. Marcus Aurelius practiced a specific exercise to maintain that distance. When he felt a strong emotion, he reminded himself, "This is just an impression my mind is generating, not objective reality." He felt anger at a betrayal and told himself, "My mind is generating a story of betrayal and the emotion of anger. But I can choose whether to act from that story or from reason." That practice of naming feelings as mental events instead of absolute truths created the space where he could choose his response, instead of being dragged by automatic reaction. You can implement this same thing when you feel a strong impulse, especially one you know doesn't serve you. Practice naming. I'm feeling the impulse to procrastinate. That impulse is a signal that my brain wants immediate comfort. But I choose according to my principles, not according to momentary impulses. That simple act of naming and distancing transforms your relationship with feelings. You're no longer the victim of them. You're the conscious observer who can decide whether to give them power or not. The fourth lie your feelings constantly perpetuate is, if you don't act on this feeling, you'll suffer. You feel hungry, and your mind tells you, if you don't eat right now, you'll suffer unbearable hunger. But if you wait 30 minutes, the hunger usually diminishes or disappears. It was a signal, not an emergency. You feel the impulse to check social media, and your mind tells you if you don't, you'll miss something important. But if you resist, you discover you didn't miss anything. It was addiction, not need. Your feelings dramatize the consequences of not obeying them to ensure you obey them. Epictetus taught, "It's not things that disturb men, but their opinions about those things." Applied to feelings, it's not the situation that generates your suffering, but your interpretation that you must act according to the feelings the situation generates. You can feel intense fear and still choose to act courageously. You can feel deep laziness and still choose to work disciplinedly. You can feel doubt and still choose to move forward confidently. The feeling has no inherent power. It only has the power you give it by believing you must obey it. The fifth lie is the most cultural. You must honor your feelings because they're valid. Yes, your feelings are real in the sense that you actually experience them. But real doesn't mean correct, useful, or worthy of obedience. You can experience the real feeling of wanting to hit someone who insulted you. That feeling is real, but it's not valid as an action guide. You can experience the real feeling of wanting to give up when something's difficult. That feeling is real, but obeying it will destroy your future. Validating the existence of a feeling doesn't mean validating acting on it. Seneca practiced what he called mental rehearsal to train his response to feelings. Before facing a difficult situation, he visualized all the negative feelings he might experience: fear, doubt, resistance, desire to escape. And he mentally rehearsed acting according to his principles despite those feelings. He didn't try to eliminate the feelings. He practiced acting well while the feelings were present, because he knew the feelings would come anyway. The question wasn't whether he'd have them, but whether they'd control him. In the end, the brutal truth is this: your feelings were evolutionarily designed to keep you safe and comfortable in a primitive environment where threats were physical and immediate. They weren't designed to navigate the modern world, where important opportunities usually require voluntary discomfort and calculated risk. Your feelings protect you from dangers that no longer exist, while paralyzing you before opportunities that do exist. They're an outdated operating system trying to run modern software, and until you recognize they're professional liars operating with obsolete information, you'll remain enslaved to their dictates. Second Stoic truth: comfort isn't rest, it's slow death disguised as pleasure. There's a drug that destroys more lives than any illegal substance: comfort. You don't recognize it as a drug because it's invisible, socially accepted, and actively promoted by culture. But examine the effects and you'll see classic addiction: compulsive seeking of the next hit, growing tolerance requiring larger doses, withdrawal symptoms when you try to quit, and gradual destruction of your potential while you consume it. The difference is that with comfort, death isn't quick and visible. It's slow, imperceptible, comfortable until the end. Marcus Aurelius, emperor with access to every imaginable luxury, practiced regular voluntary deprivation. Not because he was a masochist, but because he understood something most never see: that perpetual comfort destroys the human capacity to face difficulty, that if you always choose the easy path, you eventually lose completely the ability to walk the difficult path. That the muscle of resilience atrophies with disuse, just like physical muscle. He wrote, "Take away the opinion, and you take away the complaint, I have been harmed. Take away the complaint, and the harm disappears." He applied this to discomfort. Discomfort is only suffering if you hold the opinion that you shouldn't experience it. The problem with comfort is that it's the perfect trap because it feels like a deserved reward. You worked hard, so you deserve to relax completely. You faced stress, so you deserve total escape. You made effort, so you deserve pleasure without effort. But every time you take that comfort reward, you train your brain in a dangerous pattern. That discomfort is a problem that must be eliminated immediately. That effort must be followed by the total absence of effort. That the desirable natural state is the absence of challenge. Epictetus taught his students something that sounds harsh, but is profoundly liberating. Difficulties show what men are. When difficulty arises, remember that it's a trainer forging you. Discomfort isn't your enemy, it's your trainer. Comfort isn't your ally, it's the anesthesia preventing you from feeling how your life is deteriorating. When you constantly seek comfort, you're not resting. You're fleeing from the discomfort that generates growth. And that perpetual flight keeps you stagnant while you convince yourself you're taking care of yourself. The crucial distinction you must understand is between genuine rest and escape into comfort. Genuine rest restores your capacity to face challenge. It's adequate sleep. It's active recovery after intense effort. It's the strategic pause that prepares you for the next round of work. Escape into comfort is different. It's the compulsive seeking of the absence of any discomfort. It's infinite scrolling. It's passive entertainment for hours. It's avoiding anything that requires mental or physical effort. The first strengthens you. The second weakens you while feeling pleasurable. Seneca practiced what he called poverty rehearsals. Despite his immense wealth, he regularly lived with the absolute minimum: simple food, basic clothing, hard bed, not permanently but in regular periods. Why? To demonstrate to his nervous system that he could be fine without luxuries. To keep alive his capacity to function without comforts. To ensure he didn't become dependent on perfect conditions to feel peace. Each rehearsal was a vaccine against the weakness that perpetual comfort generates. Modern comfort is particularly insidious because it comes with a narrative of mental health and self-care. They tell you that if something makes you feel uncomfortable, you should eliminate it immediately because protecting your peace is the maximum priority. But that version of peace is fragility in disguise. Real peace doesn't require the absence of challenge. Real peace is the capacity to maintain internal balance even when the external is chaotic. And that capacity only develops through regular exposure to discomfort, not through religiously avoiding it. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily. As emperor, he could have eliminated every source of discomfort from his life. He could have delegated all difficult work. He could have avoided all confrontation. He could have lived in a bubble of absolute comfort. Instead, he imposed deliberate challenges on himself. Physical work when he could have rested. Difficult conversations when he could have avoided them. complex decisions when he could have delegated them, because he knew that perpetual comfort would turn his mind into jelly, incapable of facing real difficulty when it inevitably arrived. You can implement your own version of the discomfort rehearsal. Choose a comfort you take for granted and eliminate it temporarily. Hot water in the shower for a week. Passive entertainment after work. Snacking between meals. Scrolling before bed. Not permanently. Only during a defined period to demonstrate to your mind that you can be fine without it. That your well-being doesn't depend on that level of comfort. Each practice of voluntary discomfort is resilience training. Epictetus warned, "If you want to improve, you must be content with being seen as foolish or stupid about some things." Applied to comfort. If you want to grow, you must be willing to be uncomfortable while others are comfortable, to train while others rest, to work while others entertain themselves, to choose effort while culture screams at you to choose ease. That willingness to be different, to be uncomfortable when everyone seeks comfort, is exactly what separates growth from stagnation. Comfort also robs you of something crucial: the deep satisfaction that only comes from sustained effort. The pleasure of comfort is superficial and fleeting. It feels good in the moment, but leaves nothing behind. In contrast, the satisfaction of having done something difficult, of having sustained effort when you wanted to quit, of having built something through hard work, that satisfaction is deep and lasting. But you'll never experience it if you always choose comfort over challenge. Seneca wrote, "It's the quality of life, not the duration, that matters. And quality only comes from growth, not from comfort." You can live comfortably for decades and reach the end without having really lived anything. Or you can live constantly challenging yourself and experience life in all its depth. The first option is more comfortable. The second is more alive. And only the second generates a legacy, a memory, real satisfaction. In the end, the question you must answer honestly is, do you want a comfortable life or a meaningful life? Because you can't have both. Meaningfulness requires sustained effort, voluntary challenge, chosen discomfort. Comfort offers the absence of pain in exchange for the absence of growth. It's a Faustian pact where you sell your potential for temporary pleasure. And when you reach the end, when you look back, you discover that all that comfort wasn't rest. It was slow death that felt pleasurable until it was too late. Third Stoic truth: you don't wait for motivation to breathe, so don't wait for it to act. There exists a lie that paralyzes millions of people every day. The belief that you need to feel motivated before acting. That action follows motivation. That first comes the intense desire to do something, and then, propelled by that desire, you do it. But observe your own life honestly, and you'll see that the real sequence is exactly opposite. Motivation doesn't precede action. Motivation follows action. You act first, often without desire, and motivation appears during the process, not before. But if you wait to feel motivated before beginning, you'll wait eternally while your life is consumed in postponement, disguised as preparation. Marcus Aurelius faced this reality every morning. He didn't always wake up feeling the burning desire to govern the empire. Some days he felt exhausted, overwhelmed, without desire to face the massive responsibilities he had. But he didn't wait for motivation to arrive. He reminded himself of something simple but devastatingly effective. At dawn, when you have difficulty getting up, have this thought ready: I rise to do the work of a human being. Why should I be upset if I'm going to do that for which I was born? He didn't ask himself if he felt like it. He asked himself what his rational nature required, and he acted according to that, regardless of his feelings. The trap of waiting for motivation is that it turns your life into an emotional roulette wheel. Some days you feel motivated and you act. Most days you don't feel motivated and you don't act. So your progress is sporadic, unpredictable, completely at the mercy of emotional states you don't control. You can't build anything solid on such an unstable foundation. You can't achieve important goals with occasional effort that only happens when the right emotion randomly appears. Epictetus taught his students a crucial distinction. There are things we do because we feel like it, and things we do because they're necessary. Most important things in life fall into the second category. You don't brush your teeth only when you feel the burning desire to do it. You do it because it's necessary to maintain your dental health. You don't breathe only when you feel motivated to breathe. You do it automatically because it's necessary to live. The question then is, why do you treat important work, exercise, personal development as things you only do when you feel like it, instead of as necessary things you do regardless of feelings? The answer is that you've been trained in a toxic cultural narrative, that you should only do things that you're passionate about, that you should only work when you flow, that you should only act when you feel aligned. All that sounds spiritual and elevated, but it's the perfect recipe for a mediocre life where you never do anything difficult, because difficult things rarely generate feelings of passion or flow at the beginning. They only generate resistance, doubt, discomfort. And if you use the absence of positive feelings as a signal that you shouldn't act, you'll never act when it really matters. Seneca observed something profound about the nature of motivation. It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare. It's because we don't dare that they're difficult. When you avoid action waiting for motivation, the action remains in your mind as an impossibly difficult thing. But when you act without waiting for motivation, when you simply begin despite the resistance, you discover two things. First, it wasn't as difficult as it felt when you were avoiding it. Second, motivation appeared during the action, not before. The very act of moving generates the momentum that feels like motivation. Modern science confirms this with precision. When you begin an activity, even without desire, your brain begins to produce neurotransmitters that generate energy and focus. Physical movement triggers chemical responses that feel like motivation. But that chemistry doesn't activate while you're sitting waiting to feel motivated. It only activates when you start moving. So the real sequence is action, brain chemistry, feeling of motivation. Inverting that sequence guarantees you'll never reach steps 2 and 3. Marcus Aurelius practiced what we might call minimum viable action. On days where resistance was particularly strong, where every fiber of his being didn't want to do the work, he didn't demand to do everything perfectly. He only demanded to begin. Take the first step. Write the first line. Make the first decision. Because he knew the first step is the hardest. Once in motion, momentum takes care of the rest. But if you wait for momentum to appear before taking the first step, it will never appear. You can implement this through the 2-minute rule. When facing a task you're avoiding because you don't feel like it, commit to doing it for only 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, you can stop if you really want. But you must begin. What you'll discover is that after 2 minutes, resistance has decreased dramatically. You've broken the inertia of not doing. And most of the time you'll continue far beyond 2 minutes because momentum has been activated. But even if you stop after 2 minutes, you've won because you acted without motivation, proving to yourself that you can. Epictetus warned against what he called endless preparation. People who are constantly preparing to begin, but never actually begin. They're waiting to feel completely ready, waiting to have all the information, waiting for circumstances to be perfect, waiting for the moment when they finally feel motivated without doubt. But that moment doesn't exist. There will always be something more you could learn. There will always be a circumstance that could be improved. There will always be doubt and resistance. Waiting for everything to be perfect is simply sophisticated procrastination. The uncomfortable truth is that people who achieve meaningful things aren't people who always feel motivated. They're people who act even when they don't feel motivated, especially when they don't feel motivated, because they understood that waiting for motivation is surrendering control of your life to random emotions. It's saying, I'll only act when my brain chemistry randomly generates the right feelings. That's not a strategy. That's hope disguised as a plan. Seneca wrote, "Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Not begin when you feel inspired. Not begin when you have perfect clarity. Begin immediately, with doubt, with resistance, with lack of motivation. Begin anyway. Because every day you postpone waiting for the right feelings is a day where real life is happening and you're absent, waiting for emotional permission to participate." The daily practice that transforms this truth from concept to reality is simple. Identify the most important action you must do today. You probably don't want to do it. You probably feel resistance. Perfect. Do it first, before doing anything else, before checking messages, before getting in the zone, before waiting for motivation. Do it while resistance is present. Do it specifically because you don't feel like it. Every time you do this, you train a new neural pattern. Action doesn't require motivation. Action generates motivation. After enough repetitions, this pattern becomes your default. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Don't act as if you're going to live 10,000 years. Death looms over you. While you live, while you can, be good." The urgency comes from recognizing that time is limited. You can't afford to waste days waiting to feel motivated. You don't have 10,000 years. You have this day. And this day requires action now, not when motivation magically appears. In the end, the choice is clear. You can live at the mercy of your emotional states, acting only when you feel like it, being productive sporadically when motivation randomly appears. Or you can take control, acting according to what's necessary, regardless of what you feel. The first option is more comfortable moment to moment. The second builds a life that actually works. You don't wait for motivation to breathe. You breathe because it's necessary. Treat your important work with the same seriousness. And watch how your life transforms. Fourth Stoic truth: the pain you avoid today multiplies and returns as regret tomorrow. There's a dangerous illusion that governs most people's decisions. The belief that avoiding pain is winning. That if you manage to dodge the difficult conversation, you've won. That if you postpone the challenging work, you've won. That if you avoid the necessary confrontation, you've won. But you haven't won anything. You've only postponed the pain. And postponed pain doesn't disappear. It multiplies. It compounds. And it eventually returns not as the original pain you could have handled, but as massive regret, as a lost opportunity, as a crisis that could have been prevented if you had acted when you should have. Marcus Aurelius understood this through the direct experience of governing an empire. Every difficult decision he postponed didn't resolve itself. It worsened. Every uncomfortable conversation he avoided didn't disappear. It became a larger conflict. Every problem he ignored because confronting it would be painful didn't evaporate. It multiplied until it became a crisis. He learned the hard way that small pain avoided today always returns as massive, inevitable pain tomorrow. And he wrote, "Do not let the future disturb you. You will meet it with the same weapons of reason that you use against the present. The problem is your brain is designed to optimize for short-term comfort, not long-term well-being. When facing the choice between pain now or pain later, your primitive nervous system will always vote for later. It will always choose to postpone. Not because it's a wise strategy, but because it's programmed to avoid immediate discomfort without considering future consequences. It's like a child choosing to eat candy instead of vegetables. The candy tastes better now. The vegetable builds health later. But the child doesn't have the capacity to value the future benefit over present pleasure. Epictetus taught his students something brutal but liberating. What you fear to suffer, you're already suffering by fearing it. When you avoid the difficult conversation because you fear the discomfort, you're experiencing that discomfort multiplied every day you postpone it. The worry about having to do it eventually, the anxiety of knowing it's pending, the mental weight of the unresolved thing, all of that is suffering. So you didn't actually avoid the pain. You distributed it in small doses over a long period instead of handling it once. And frequently, the distributed pain is greater than the concentrated pain would have been. The most common form of this avoidance is procrastination. You don't do the work today because it would be uncomfortable. So you'll do it tomorrow, except tomorrow you don't do it either because it's still uncomfortable. Each day you postpone, the debt accumulates. The task becomes bigger. The deadline approaches, the stress increases, until finally, in panic, you do the work in terrible conditions with massive pressure. All the pain you avoided during weeks of procrastination returns compressed into hours of panic. You didn't avoid anything. You just traded manageable distributed pain for destructive concentrated panic. Seneca practiced what he called immediate action on the uncomfortable. When he identified something that needed to be done, but would be uncomfortable, he did it immediately before his mind could generate elaborate justifications to postpone it. A difficult conversation with a friend, he had it that day. An unpleasant decision about a business, he made it that morning. Work that required intense effort, he began it without delay. Not because he enjoyed discomfort, but because he had learned that postponing it only magnified it. The mathematical truth about pain is this: pain avoided today equals pain multiplied tomorrow. If the pain of exercising today is 5 on a scale of 10, the pain of having a deteriorated body in 10 years from not exercising is 9 out of 10 for decades. If the pain of having an honest conversation with your partner today is 6 out of 10, the pain of divorce or a dead relationship in 5 years is 10 out of 10 for years. If the pain of building a business today is 7 out of 10, the pain of working at a job you hate for 30 years is 8 out of 10 for decades. The numbers don't lie. Avoiding always costs more than facing. Marcus Aurelius specifically reminded himself of this when facing decisions. It is the power of the mind to be invincible. And he used that power to act on pain while it was small and manageable. Instead of waiting for it to grow until it was inevitable and unmanageable, he didn't wait for conflict to become crisis. He addressed it when it was conflict. He didn't wait for the small problem to become catastrophe. He resolved it when it was small. This practice of early action on the uncomfortable saved him massive pain repeatedly. You can implement this through the 24-hour rule. When you identify something uncomfortable you need to do, you give yourself 24 hours maximum to begin action on it. Not necessarily to complete it, but to take the first step. A difficult conversation, you schedule it within 24 hours. An intimidating project, you work on it for 30 minutes within 24 hours. A decision you're avoiding, you make it within 24 hours. This rule prevents the discomfort from staying in your mind, multiplying into an imaginary monster much worse than reality. Epictetus warned against what he called perpetual flight. People who constantly flee from present discomfort only to find magnified pain in the future. They flee from hard work today toward poverty tomorrow. They flee from discipline today toward illness tomorrow. They flee from honesty today toward broken relationships tomorrow. Each flight seems like a small victory. I avoided discomfort today, but it's a tactical victory that loses the strategic war. Because the pain you avoided didn't disappear, it relocated to your future and began growing with compound interest. The Stoic practice to break the avoidance pattern is the premeditation of consequences. When you feel tempted to avoid something uncomfortable, you visualize specifically what will happen if you avoid it. Not vague generalities, specific and honest consequences. If you avoid having the honest conversation with your partner about a real problem, visualize exactly how that problem will worsen over the coming months. If you avoid starting the business because you feel fear, visualize exactly where you'll be in 5 years if you don't start. If you avoid exercise today, visualize your body in 10 years of continuing to avoid it. Making future consequences vividly real in the present changes the emotional calculation. Seneca wrote something that summarizes this perfectly. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. But there's an important corollary. If you avoid present reality out of imaginary fear, you'll eventually face a future reality that's worse than what you imagined about the present. The conversation you avoided out of fear of discomfort becomes the divorce that's worse than your worst imagination of the conversation. The work you avoided out of fear of failure becomes the regret of never having tried that's worse than any possible failure. Marcus Aurelius also practiced what we might call acceptance of necessary pain. He recognized that certain pain is simply part of living well. The pain of discipline, the pain of growth, the pain of honest confrontation, the pain of sustained effort. That pain isn't a problem that must be eliminated. It's the price that must be paid, and the time to pay it is now, when it's a small price. Not later, when it has multiplied into a massive price. In the end, you have two options. You can live avoiding every present discomfort, always choosing the easiest option now, postponing every difficult thing. That life feels comfortable day to day. But it inevitably leads to massive regret, to lost opportunities, to crises that could have been prevented. Or you can live facing discomfort when it appears, choosing to do the difficult when it's still manageable, paying the small price now to avoid the massive price later. That life is uncomfortable day to day, but it leads to deep satisfaction, to real growth, to a life lived without paralyzing regrets. The choice is yours. But there's no third option where you avoid present pain and also avoid future pain. That option doesn't exist. The pain you avoid today is already waiting for you tomorrow, multiplied. Fifth, Stoic truth. Every time you obey a weak emotion, you train your own defeat. There exists a concept in neuroscience that most people don't understand, but that completely determines the trajectory of their lives. Neuroplasticity. Your brain isn't a fixed structure. It's an organ that's constantly reconfiguring itself based on what you do repeatedly. Every action you take, every decision you make, every pattern you repeat is literally rewiring your brain. And here's the devastating truth you must understand. Every time you obey a weak emotion, every time you give in to an impulse you know doesn't serve you, every time you choose comfort over discipline, you're training your brain to be weaker. You're building the neural circuits of surrender. You're programming your own defeat. Marcus Aurelius understood this without knowing the word neuroplasticity. He wrote, "Beware of voluptuousness, because when you have surrendered to it, you have weakened your mind." Every time he gave in to a weak impulse, he knew he hadn't just lost that specific battle. He had made the next battle harder. He had trained his mind in the pattern of surrender. That's why he was so rigorous with himself. Not out of moral perfectionism, but out of practical understanding that each choice trains future choices. Every victory strengthens, every surrender weakens. The problem is your brain learns through repetition without discriminating between good and bad patterns. If you repeat a useful action, the brain builds neural circuits that make that action easier in the future. If you repeat a destructive action, the brain does exactly the same thing. It doesn't judge, it only optimizes for what you do frequently. So if you frequently give in to laziness, your brain becomes expert at laziness. If you frequently procrastinate, your brain optimizes for procrastination. If you frequently give up when things are difficult, your brain builds a neural highway towards surrender. Epictetus taught his students, they must guard every small action because accumulated small actions determine character. First, you tolerate small, wrong actions. Then come the big ones. You don't start as a completely corrupt person. You start by giving in to a small temptation. Then another. Then another. And each small surrender builds the muscle of surrender until surrendering is your automatic response to any difficulty. The practical application of this truth requires treating every small decision as training. They're not just insignificant moments. They're training sessions where you program your brain for strength or weakness. When the alarm sounds and you feel the temptation to stay in bed, that's not just a decision about 5 more minutes of sleep. It's a training session. If you get up despite not wanting to, you train discipline. If you stay, you train surrender. When you feel the impulse to check social media during deep work, it's not just about 3 minutes of distraction. It's training. If you resist, you strengthen focus. If you give in, you strengthen distraction. Seneca practiced what he called daily victory in the small. He identified the small temptations he would face during the day and committed to winning those battles specifically because they were small. He didn't wait for big dramatic tests to demonstrate his strength. He knew strength is built in small daily battles. The temptation of unnecessary food, he resisted it. The temptation to postpone uncomfortable work, he defeated it. The temptation of emotional reaction to provocation, he controlled it. Each small victory was a training session that prepared him for big victories. Modern science confirms this with precision. When you resist an impulse, you strengthen the connections between your prefrontal cortex and subcortical structures. You literally build better executive control. When you give in to an impulse, you weaken those connections. So each resistance makes the next resistance slightly easier. Each surrender makes the next surrender slightly more likely. They're not isolated events. They're links in a chain that determines who you become. Marcus Aurelius specifically asked himself before giving in to any temptation, does this strengthen me or weaken me? If the answer was, it weakens me, he didn't do it no matter how tempting it was, because he understood you can't build strength by constantly giving in to weakness. You can't develop discipline by constantly obeying undisciplined impulses. Every action is a vote for the type of person you are. Enough votes in one direction, and that becomes your identity. You can implement this through the practice of identity-based actions. Before making a decision, especially a small one, ask yourself, what kind of person does this? If you eat junk food compulsively, what kind of person does that? A person who doesn't control their impulses. If you postpone important work to scroll, what kind of person does that? A person who chooses distraction over discipline. If you give up when something's difficult, what kind of person does that? A person who doesn't sustain effort. Now ask yourself, do I want to be that kind of person? If not, don't do that action. Every action is a vote. Epictetus warned, it's impossible for someone to begin learning what they think they already know. Applied to neural training. If you believe your small actions don't matter because they're small, you'll never train strength. Because strength is built exactly in those small actions repeated thousands of times. Not in dramatic moments that rarely come, but in the mundane choices you face dozens of times each day. The practice of resisting weak emotions also has a massive compound benefit. The first times are brutally difficult. You resist temptation, and it feels like an internal war where you're barely winning. But each victory makes the next battle slightly easier. After 100 victories, resistance feels more natural. After 1,000 victories, it's your automatic response. You've completely rewired your brain. What previously required enormous conscious effort is now your default. But you get there only through the accumulation of small victories, not by waiting for one big unique victory. Seneca wrote, it's not because things are difficult that we don't dare. It's because we don't dare that they're difficult. Applied to neural training. It's not because resisting impulses is difficult that you don't resist. It's because you haven't trained resistance through repeated practice that it feels difficult. If you had trained for months, what now seems impossible would be relatively easy. The difficulty isn't inherent, it's the result of lack of training. In the end, you understand you're not the victim of your brain. You're the architect of your brain. Every decision you make, especially the small ones that don't matter, is sculpting who you become. You can sculpt a disciplined person through 1,000 small victories over weak emotions. Or you can sculpt a weak person through 1,000 small surrenders to those same emotions. The choice is yours in every moment, but you can't pretend small choices don't count. They count more than big ones because you make them 1,000 times more frequently. And the sum of those thousands of small choices is your life, your character, your destiny. Sixth Stoic truth: discipline isn't punishment. It's the only real freedom that exists. There exists a massive confusion about what freedom is. Modern culture sells you a distorted version. Freedom is being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, without restrictions. Freedom is the absence of rules, the absence of structure, the absence of discipline. Freedom is unlimited indulgence. But live like that for 6 months, and you'll discover something devastating, that this freedom is actually the most absolute slavery, because it turns you into a slave to every impulse, every desire, every passing emotion. You're not free. You're completely controlled by internal forces that change moment to moment according to random brain chemistry. Marcus Aurelius, emperor with absolute power to literally do whatever he wanted without external consequences, understood this deeply. He could have lived without any personal discipline. No one would have questioned him. But he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not external events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And he exercised that power through fierce discipline, not because he enjoyed restriction, but because he understood that discipline is what kept him free from the tyranny of his own impulses. That without discipline, even an emperor is a slave. Slave to his fluctuating desires. The truth you must understand is this: discipline doesn't restrict your freedom. Discipline creates your freedom. When you have discipline over your eating, you're free from obesity, free from disease, free from feeling trapped in a body you can't control. When you have discipline over your work, you're free from poverty, free from dependence, free from being at others' mercy to survive. When you have discipline over your emotions, you're free from reactivity, free from drama, free from being constantly shaken by external stimuli. Discipline doesn't take away freedom. Discipline is the tool that builds real freedom. Epictetus, who lived years as a physical slave before obtaining external freedom, taught something radical: that he had known technically free men who were more enslaved than he ever was. Because they were slaves to their passions, their fears, their uncontrolled desires, and he had seen physical slaves who were freer than their masters because they had mastered their internal reactions. Real freedom isn't about your external circumstances, it's about your internal mastery. And that mastery only comes through discipline, applied consistently. The problem with life without discipline is that it feels free at first. You eat what you want when you want. You sleep when you feel like it. You work only when you feel motivation. You avoid everything uncomfortable. It feels like freedom. But live like that for a year and you'll see the chains you've built. Chains of destructive habits, chains of debt, chains of obesity, chains of broken relationships because you never did the difficult work of maintaining them. Chains of unrealized potential because you never disciplined yourself to develop it. Every act of freedom to do what you wanted in the moment was an act of building a future prison. Seneca practiced what he called freedom through self-imposed limits. He established strict rules for himself, not because they were externally imposed, but because they gave him internal freedom. Rules about how much he would eat. Rules about how much he would speak. Rules about how he would spend his time. Each rule was a voluntary limit that paradoxically expanded his freedom, because within those limits, He wasn't constantly negotiating with his impulses. The decisions were already made. His mental energy was free for important things instead of being spent on constant internal debate. Discipline also frees you from something particularly insidious, the tyranny of constant decision-making. When you don't have discipline, every moment requires a new decision. Should I eat this? Should I exercise today? Should I work now or later? Each decision consumes mental energy. And after enough decisions, your capacity to decide well is exhausted. So you make bad decisions from decision fatigue, not from lack of knowledge. But when you have discipline, most decisions are already made. You have a system, you have a structure. You execute the system without internal debate. That's massive mental energy freedom. Marcus Aurelius faced thousands of decisions every day as emperor. If he had negotiated each one through the feelings of the moment, he would have been paralyzed. Instead, he had clear principles that made most decisions automatic. Does this action serve the common good? Does this decision reflect virtue? Does this behavior honor my rational nature? Those principles were the discipline that freed him from the need for endless debate. Decisions flowed naturally from established principles. You can implement this through decision architecture. Identify the decisions you make repeatedly and that you frequently make poorly when you decide case by case. What you eat, when you work, how you spend free time. For each one, establish a clear rule that eliminates negotiation. Not, I'll try to eat healthy. That requires constant negotiation. But I only eat these foods during the week. Not, I'll work when I feel productive. That guarantees procrastination. But I work from 8 to 12 without exceptions. Rules eliminate debate. You execute the system. That execution without debate is freedom. Epictetus warned against confusing licentiousness with freedom. No man is free who is not master of himself. You can do what you want, but if what you want changes every moment according to impulses you don't control, you're not free. You're a puppet of your own emotions. Real freedom requires that you have mastery over what you want, not just the ability to pursue every passing desire. And that mastery only comes from the discipline that trains your desires toward what genuinely serves your well-being, instead of what simply feels good momentarily. The practice of discipline also reveals something about human nature, that you respect yourself more when you live disciplinedly than when you live indulgently. Self-indulgence generates self-contempt. You know you're not living according to your potential. You know you're constantly giving in to the weak version of yourself, and that knowledge corrodes your self-respect. But when you live with discipline, when you fulfill commitments to yourself, when you act according to principles instead of impulses, you develop deep respect for yourself. That self-respect is a form of freedom that indulgence can never generate. Seneca wrote, "Most of humanity is unhappy not because life is hard, but because they are weak. And that weakness comes primarily from lack of discipline. Life presents challenges to everyone. But the disciplined person faces those challenges from a position of strength. Strong body, clear mind, stable finances, constructive habits. The undisciplined person faces the same challenges from a position of weakness. Deteriorated body, foggy mind, chaotic finances, destructive habits, same challenges, completely different capacities to handle them. The difference is discipline." Marcus Aurelius also recognized that discipline doesn't mean extreme rigidity without flexibility. It means having a default structure you follow consistently, but with the wisdom to adjust when circumstances genuinely require it. It's not, I never deviate from my rules no matter what. It's, I have clear rules I follow, except when genuine reason demonstrates that an adjustment is necessary. The crucial distinction is between flexibility based on wisdom and flexibility based on the impulse to avoid discomfort. The question you must ask yourself honestly is, what kind of freedom do you want? Freedom to do whatever you feel like moment to moment according to impulses you don't control. That's slavery disguised as freedom. Or freedom to live according to your deepest values regardless of momentary impulses. That's the real freedom only discipline can generate. The first feels like freedom in the short term, but builds a prison in the long term. The second feels like restriction in the short term, but builds massive freedom in the long term. Epictetus summarized this perfectly. No man is free who is not master of himself. And becoming master of yourself requires discipline applied daily in thousands of small decisions. It's not a single event where you decide, I'll be disciplined, and magically you are. It's the daily practice of choosing structure over chaos, principles over impulses, long-term over short-term. Each choice is small, but 1,000 small choices accumulated over months build a completely different life. A life where you're free because you're not constantly at the mercy of your own fluctuating emotions. In the end, discipline isn't what takes life away from you. It's what gives you life. It's not the restriction that limits you. It's the structure that frees you. It's not the punishment you suffer. It's the practice that empowers you. And every day you choose discipline over indulgence, structure over chaos, principles over impulses. You're building real freedom. The only freedom no one can take away from you because it exists completely within your mastery over yourself. Seventh Stoic truth. Your mind negotiates your surrender every morning, and you say yes. Every morning, before you're fully awake, your mind is already working. But it's not working for you, it's working against you. It's generating a list of reasons why today isn't a good day to do what you promised to do. It's building an elaborate narrative about why you should postpone, why you should take a day off, why you should give up on that difficult commitment. And if you don't recognize this negotiation for what it is, an attack by your own mind against your goals, you'll fall into the trap every time. Your mind negotiates your surrender. And most days, you say yes, without even realizing you were negotiating. Marcus Aurelius knew this battle intimately. As emperor, he had no one to force him to get up, no one to obligate him to work, no one to make him fulfill his duties if he chose not to. The battle was completely internal, and he wrote about it with brutal honesty. At dawn, when you have trouble getting up, have this thought ready. I rise to do the work of a human being. He didn't wait to see what he'd think when he woke up. He prepared in advance his response to the negotiation he knew would come. Because he knew that if he entered the negotiation unprepared, he would lose. The problem is, your mind is an extraordinarily skilled negotiator. It knows exactly your weak points. It knows exactly what arguments convince you. You worked hard yesterday. You deserve rest today. You're a bit tired. Better to recover completely before continuing. One day won't make a difference. You can start tomorrow. You don't feel well. Listen to your body. Each argument sounds reasonable. Each one seems like sensible self-care. But they're all rationalizations designed to achieve one goal: that you give up on what you promised to do. Epictetus taught his students they must recognize these thoughts for what they are: initial impressions that have no inherent authority. When an impression attacks you, say, "You are only an impression, not necessarily the truth." Your mind generates the thought, "I'm too tired to work today." That's a thought, not a fact. You can observe it without obeying it. You can recognize that your mind is trying to negotiate surrender, and you can choose not to participate in that negotiation. The most effective tactic your mind uses is presenting surrender as a unique and insignificant decision. Just today, just this once, just because circumstances are special today. It never presents you with the truth that this surrender trains the pattern of surrender, that just this once is the lie you tell yourself every time. That the decision isn't about today in isolation, but about what kind of person you are, whether you're someone who fulfills commitments or someone who constantly negotiates to escape them. Seneca practiced what he called pre-decided response. Before the situation of temptation, he decided exactly how he would respond. He didn't leave the decision for the moment when his mind would be generating creative arguments for surrender. He decided in advance, "When I feel lazy tomorrow morning, I will get up immediately without negotiating. When I feel the temptation to eat unnecessarily, I will drink water instead." Each pre-decided response eliminated the space for negotiation. The decision was already made. Only execution remained. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that morning negotiation is more dangerous because your willpower is at its weakest upon waking. You haven't had victories during the day that strengthen your resolve. You're in a transitional state between sleep and wakefulness. Your defenses are down. That's why he prepared his mind the night before. He reviewed his commitments for the next day. He reminded himself why they mattered. He visualized executing them successfully. All this built the mental momentum that made morning negotiation less effective. You can implement this through a nighttime preparation ritual. 5 minutes before sleeping, review tomorrow's commitments. For each one you know will be a temptation to evade. Write the reason why it's important and the response you'll give when your mind tries to negotiate. Tomorrow, I won't want to exercise. My mind will say I'm tired. My response will be, tiredness is a temporary feeling. My health is permanent. I will exercise. That written script becomes your automatic response when negotiation begins. Epictetus warned, "If you haven't decided what you'll do in a situation before it arrives, you'll act according to the impulse of the moment." And the impulse of the moment almost always favors comfort over growth, ease over challenge, surrender over persistence. So, if you enter the situation without a pre-made decision, you've already lost. Your best chance of winning is to decide before the negotiation begins and then execute that decision without internal debate when the moment arrives. Negotiation doesn't just happen in the morning. It happens every time you face a decision point where the right thing is uncomfortable. Your mind immediately begins generating alternatives. You could do this instead. You could postpone it until later. You could do an easier version. Each alternative sounds reasonable, but they all lead in the same direction, away from what you actually need to do. And if you participate in the internal debate about these alternatives, you'll probably end up choosing one of them, because your mind is better at arguing than you are at resisting. Seneca wrote, It is the power of the mind to be invincible. But that power doesn't come from winning internal debates against your own mind. It comes from refusing to participate in those debates. When your mind proposes an alternative to what you know you must do, don't debate. Simply execute what you decided. The mind generates the thought, "I could do this later." You don't respond with a counter-argument. You simply begin doing what you must do now. Action ends negotiation more effectively than any argument. Marcus Aurelius practiced what we call immediate action without thought. In moments where he knew thinking would generate procrastination, he acted immediately without allowing thought. The alarm sounds. He gets up immediately without allowing himself to think about it. He identifies an important task. He begins immediately without deliberating. He sees an opportunity to do the right thing. He takes it immediately without analyzing. Because he had learned that thinking in these moments didn't generate clarity. It generated rationalization to avoid discomfort. The practice of recognizing negotiation when it begins is a skill that develops over time. At first, you don't notice you're negotiating until you've already surrendered. With practice, you begin to notice negotiation thoughts when they appear. There's my mind, trying to convince me to postpone. That recognition creates the space where you can choose not to participate. You don't have to debate with the thought. Just recognize it as an attempt at negotiation and continue with what you decided to do. Epictetus taught that the uncontrolled mind is like a noisy market, with vendors constantly shouting, trying to convince you to buy their products. Your job isn't to debate with each vendor. It's to walk directly through the market to your destination without being distracted by their shouting. Your mind will shout reasons to surrender. Recognize that it's shouting. Continue toward your goal without debate. In the end, you understand that your mind isn't your enemy, but it's not always your ally either. It's a tool that can work for you or against you, depending on how you use it. When you allow it to negotiate your surrender every morning without resistance, it works against you. When you recognize that negotiation, name it, and act according to pre-made decisions without participating in the debate. You use your mind as an effective tool. The difference between these two ways of relating to your own mind is literally the difference between a life where you constantly surrender and a life where you consistently fulfill. And that difference is decided every morning in the first moment of consciousness, when the negotiation begins. 8th Stoic truth. You're not your thoughts. You're the one who decides whether to obey them or ignore them. There exists a toxic identification that destroys most people's capacity to act effectively. The belief that your thoughts are you. That if you think, "I can't do this," then you genuinely can't. That if you think, "This is too difficult," then it's objectively impossible. That if you think, "I'm not the type of person who does X," then that's your immutable identity. But all of this is a fundamental confusion about the nature of thought. Your thoughts aren't truths about reality. They're mental events your brain generates constantly. Most of them incorrect. Many of them designed to protect you from discomfort rather than help you grow. Marcus Aurelius understood this separation with exceptional clarity. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not external events. Realize this and you will find strength." That power over your mind specifically includes the power not to identify with every thought that appears. The power to observe a thought without assuming it's the truth. The power to notice, "My mind is generating a thought of doubt," without becoming a doubtful person. The thought is an event you observe, not an identity you are. The problem arises because most people have no distance between thought and identity. They think, "I am anxious," when they really should think, "I am experiencing anxiety." The difference is crucial. The first version makes anxiety part of your immutable identity. The second version makes it a temporary state you're experiencing. You can change a state. You can't easily change identity. So how you define your relationship with thoughts and emotions determines whether you can change them or you're trapped in them. Epictetus taught a specific exercise to create this separation. When you experience a strong thought, especially negative, practice naming it in third person. Not, "I am anxious," but, "I notice anxiety is present." Not, "I am a failure," but my mind is generating a story of failure. This simple linguistic shift creates massive psychological distance. You're no longer the thought, you're the observer of the thought, and the observer can choose whether to act on the thought or not. The truth about thoughts is that your brain generates them automatically without your conscious control. You don't choose what thoughts appear. They appear based on established patterns, past experiences, current brain chemistry, external stimuli. The only thing you control is whether you give them power through action. The thought, "I can't do this," appears. You didn't choose to have it, but you can choose whether to treat it as a truth that determines your action or as mental noise you ignore while acting anyway. Seneca practiced what he called observation without judgment of his own thoughts. When he noticed a negative or limiting thought, he didn't fight it or suppress it. He simply observed it as he would observe a passing cloud. "Ah, there's the thought of doubt. Interesting." Not, "I am doubtful. I must eliminate this doubt." But doubt is present. I'll continue with my plan anyway. Doubt could be present without controlling his behavior, because behavior was determined by his principles, not by the presence or absence of certain thoughts. Marcus Aurelius constantly faced thoughts that, had he obeyed them, would have destroyed his capacity to govern effectively. Thoughts of inadequacy, thoughts of desire to escape, thoughts of doubt about his decisions. But he practiced not identifying with those thoughts. He recognized them as natural products of a human mind under pressure, not as truths about his capacity or his situation. And he acted according to his principles while those thoughts were present. You can implement this through the practice of cognitive diffusion. When a limiting thought appears, instead of debating or suppressing it, add a simple phrase before. "I'm having the thought that," "I'm having the thought that I can't do this," "I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." That phrase reminds you it's a thought, a mental event, not objective reality. You don't have to believe the thought just because your mind generated it. Epictetus warned against what he called giving assent to incorrect impressions. Your mind generates the impression, "This is impossible." That's just an initial impression. If you give it assent, if you accept it as truth and act according to it, you convert it into your reality. But you can recognize the impression without giving it assent. My mind says it's impossible. I'll try anyway, and discover empirically. The impression has no power until you give it power through assent and action according to it. The practice of separation between you and your thoughts also reveals something liberating, that you can have a thought and do exactly the opposite. You can think, "I don't want to exercise," and exercise anyway. You can think, "This will be a disaster," and try anyway. You can think, "I'm not capable," and act as if you were capable anyway. The thought doesn't obligate you to anything. It only seems to obligate you when you identify completely with it. Seneca wrote, "We are not disturbed by things, but by the opinions we have about things." Your thoughts about a situation, not the situation itself, generate your emotional response. A difficult situation appears. Your mind generates the thought, "This is terrible, I can't handle it." That thought generates paralyzing anxiety. But you can have a different thought about the same situation. "This is a challenge. I have resources to face it." Same external event. Different thoughts. Completely different emotional responses. This demonstrates you're not at the mercy of external events. You're responding to your thoughts about events. Marcus Aurelius specifically practiced thought reframing. When a negative thought appeared, he consciously generated an alternative interpretation. Thought, "This person betrayed me. It's terrible." Reframe. "This person acted according to their nature and limited understanding, as was to be expected." Thought, "I lost this opportunity. I'm a failure." Reframe. "This opportunity didn't work out. There are other opportunities, and this experience taught me something." He wasn't denying reality. He was choosing the interpretation that empowered him instead of the interpretation that paralyzed him. The crucial distinction is between automatic thought and chosen thought. Automatic thoughts appear without your control. Chosen thoughts are conscious responses you deliberately generate. Most people live completely at the mercy of automatic thoughts. They appear and they obey them without questioning. But you can train the capacity to notice the automatic thought and consciously choose a more useful alternative thought. You're not denying reality. You're choosing how to interpret it. Epictetus summarized this perfectly. "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they have of things." Your view, your interpretation, your thought about a situation is what determines your experience, and you can choose your interpretation. You're not the victim of your automatic thoughts. You're the architect who can consciously construct more useful thoughts when the automatic ones don't serve. In the end, the separation between you and your thoughts is possibly the most liberating skill you can develop, because it means that no matter what thoughts your mind generates, doubt, fear, negativity, limitation, none of them control you unless you choose to give them power. You can observe them, acknowledge them, and act according to your principles regardless of them. Your thoughts are the mental weather that constantly changes. You are the stable observer who remains while the weather changes. And when you understand that distinction viscerally, not just intellectually, you reach a freedom most never experience. Freedom from your own mind. Ninth Stoic truth: the man who waits to feel ready never begins and dies waiting. There exists a form of death that doesn't appear on medical certificates, but kills more people than any disease: death by perpetual waiting. People who spend entire decades waiting for the right moment, waiting to feel completely prepared, waiting for all doubts to disappear, waiting for circumstances to align perfectly. And while they wait, life is consumed. Years pass, opportunities evaporate, potential withers unrealized, and in the end, on their deathbed, they realize the devastating truth that the perfect moment they were waiting for never existed. That complete preparation was an illusion. that they died waiting for a permission only they could give themselves. Marcus Aurelius understood this with the urgency that comes from recognizing mortality. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let this determine what you do, say, and think. Not you could die eventually in some distant future. You could die now. Today. This hour. And if that's the reality, does it make sense to wait to feel ready before living according to your values? Does it make sense to postpone the important until you're completely prepared? No. Because completely prepared never comes. And if you wait, you waste the only genuinely irreplaceable resource, time. The problem with waiting to feel ready is that it's the perfect trap with no visible exit. Because you'll never feel completely ready for something significant you haven't done before. The feeling of readiness only comes after having acted, not before. So if you wait for the feeling before the action, you're waiting for something only action can generate. It's a perfect vicious circle, and millions of people live trapped in it for decades without recognizing that the only way out is to act without the feeling, proving to yourself through action that you were more capable than you felt. Epictetus taught his students something that sounds harsh but is profoundly liberating. If you wanted to be an Olympian, you would have had to start years ago. But you start now, or you never start. There's no perfect moment in the future where you'll magically be more prepared than now. Circumstances won't be significantly better. Your capacity won't be dramatically superior unless you start developing it now. So the real choice isn't between starting now or starting when you're ready. It's between starting now or never starting. The illusion of being ready is particularly insidious because it disguises itself as prudence. It sounds responsible to say, "I want to be completely prepared before beginning." It sounds wise to wait until you have all the information. It sounds mature not to rush. But examine honestly how many people use that prudence as a perpetual excuse to never act. How many people are preparing for years without real progress because endless preparation is sophisticated procrastination. Seneca practiced what he called action before perfect preparation. When he identified something that needed to be done, he gave himself a short deadline for minimum preparation and then acted regardless of whether he felt ready. He didn't wait to master every aspect. He didn't wait to eliminate all uncertainty. He did sufficient preparation not to be recklessly ignorant and then began. He learned the rest during execution. Because he understood that most valuable learning comes from doing, not from preparing to do. Marcus Aurelius constantly faced decisions where complete information was impossible. As emperor, he couldn't wait to have perfect certainty about every decision because waiting meant the situation worsened while he deliberated. So he developed the capacity to act with incomplete information, with doubt present, without the feeling of being completely prepared. He acted according to his best judgment with available information, and adjusted according to results. That capacity to act without complete certainty is what separated effective leaders from people paralyzed by the need for perfect preparation. You can implement this through the sufficiency rule. When considering starting something, ask yourself not, "Am I completely ready?" but "Do I have enough knowledge and capacity to take the first productive step?" If the answer is yes, you begin immediately. You don't wait to be ready for step 10. You only need to be sufficiently prepared for step 1. You take step 1, you learn from it. You prepare for step 2, you repeat. This gradual progression based on action is how capacity is actually built, not through endless theoretical preparation. Epictetus specifically warned against confusing study with progress. How much longer will you make plans about what a good man should be instead of being one? You can study virtue for decades without practicing it. You can read about courage without acting courageously. You can learn about discipline without living disciplinedly. And at the end of all that study, you're no more virtuous, brave, or disciplined than when you started. You just have more theoretical knowledge. But knowledge without application is entertainment, not transformation. The practice of beginning without feeling ready also reveals something crucial about the nature of growth. That genuine growth always happens outside the comfort zone. If you wait to feel comfortable before beginning, you guarantee you'll never grow. Because growth, by definition, requires doing things you currently don't know how to do well. It requires the discomfort of being a beginner. It requires the humiliation of making visible mistakes. If you avoid that by waiting to be good before starting, you'll never start, because you only become good through practice that begins when you're bad. Seneca wrote, "It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare. It's because we don't dare that they're difficult." Applied to starting without feeling ready. It's not because you're not prepared that you don't begin. It's because you don't begin that you remain unprepared. Real preparation comes from action, not from study prior to action. When you finally dare to begin without feeling ready, you discover it wasn't as difficult as it seemed from outside. And that each action prepares you for the next action better than any amount of study would have achieved. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that waiting for the perfect moment is a form of arrogance disguised as humility. It sounds humble to say, "I'm not ready yet," but it implicitly assumes you'll eventually be perfectly ready, that there exists a future version of you who will have everything figured out. That version doesn't exist. There will always be limitations. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be aspects where you're not completely prepared. Accepting that and acting anyway isn't arrogance. It's mature realism about the human condition. The question you must ask yourself brutally is, what specifically are you waiting for? Not a vague answer, to be more prepared. What exactly must happen before you begin? When you define the specific criterion, you usually discover it's arbitrary or impossible. I'll wait until I know everything about the subject. Impossible. You'll never know everything. I'll wait until I have certainty of success. Impossible. Certainty doesn't exist. I'll wait until I have no fear. Impossible. Fear is part of doing meaningful things. Each specific criterion reveals you're waiting for the impossible, which means you'll never begin unless you change the criterion. Epictetus taught, "First say to yourself what kind of person you want to be. Then do what you must do." Not first say what kind of person you want to be, then prepare exhaustively, then, when you feel ready, do what you must do. But say who you want to be, then immediately do what that kind of person would do. Action is what converts you into that kind of person, not preparation, not waiting. Repeated action. You begin today without feeling ready. The practice of beginning without complete preparation also teaches you a vital lesson about perfectionism. That perfectionism isn't a high standard, it's a form of procrastination. A high standard is, I'll do this the best I can with current capacity. Perfectionism is, I won't do this until I can do it perfectly. The first generates action and gradual improvement. The second generates perpetual paralysis. And when you reach the end of your life, perfectionism doesn't look like a virtue. It looks like the excuse you used to never try. Seneca observed, "It's not that we have little time, it's that we waste a lot. And the primary way to waste time is waiting to be ready. Each day you postpone beginning is a day you could have been learning through action. Each week you wait is a week of progress you'll never recover. Each month you postpone is a month where you could have made educational mistakes that would have prepared you better than any theoretical study." Marcus Aurelius specifically reminded himself when he felt the temptation to postpone. Don't act as if you're going to live 10,000 years. Death looms over you. While you live, while you can, be good. There's no time for endless waiting. There's no guarantee of tomorrow. And if you're going to do something meaningful with your life, the moment to begin is now. Not when you feel ready. Now, with doubt present, with fear present, with incomplete preparation. Now, in the end, you understand that being ready is an illusion your mind uses to protect you from the discomfort of beginning. But that protection is poisoned. It protects you from temporary discomfort at the cost of depriving you of permanent growth. It protects you from possible failure at the cost of guaranteeing you'll never try. It protects you from being a visible beginner at the cost of never developing mastery. And when you look at your life honestly, you see that all the meaningful things you achieved began when you didn't feel ready. And all the things you regret not having done are things you never began because you waited to feel ready. That correlation isn't coincidence. It's the fundamental truth about how human growth works. You begin without feeling ready, or you never begin. 10th Stoic truth. Life doesn't reward intentions, only blood, sweat, and brutal execution. There exists a comforting fantasy that most people maintain throughout their entire lives. The belief that their good intentions count for something, that the universe somehow records that you really wanted to exercise, build a business, write a book, improve a relationship, that your plans and aspirations have inherent value even if you never executed them. But life doesn't work that way. Life doesn't have a point system for intention. There's no reward for really wanting to do something. There's no recognition for planning. There are only tangible results that come from sustained action. And if there's no action, no matter how sincere your intentions were, there are no results. Marcus Aurelius understood this with the brutal clarity that comes from real responsibility. As emperor, his intentions to govern well meant nothing if he didn't make concrete decisions. His reform plans changed nothing if he didn't execute them. His desires for justice helped no one if he didn't act justly. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Not think about being good. Not plan to be good. Be good through real action now." The problem with living in the world of intentions is that it feels productive without requiring real effort. You can spend hours planning the perfect exercise routine without sweating once. You can dedicate days designing a business plan without risking a penny. You can invest weeks researching the best way to write without writing a word. And each hour invested in planning feels like progress. Your brain rewards you with a sense of achievement, but you haven't achieved anything. You've only avoided the discomfort of real action by disguising avoidance as preparation. Epictetus taught his students a devastating distinction. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Talking about what you believe, planning what you'll do, explaining your intentions. All of that is easy. It doesn't require courage. It doesn't require discipline. It doesn't require sacrifice. Embodying your philosophy, living according to your values even when it's difficult, executing your plans even when you don't feel like it, that requires everything. And it's the only thing that counts. The world doesn't change because you thought about changing it. It changes because you acted to change it. The uncomfortable truth about results is that they're completely indifferent to how much you wanted to achieve them. You can desperately want to have a healthy body, but if you don't exercise and eat well consistently, you won't have it. Your intense desire doesn't generate the result. You can passionately desire to have a successful business, but if you don't do the difficult work of building it day after day, it won't exist. Your passion doesn't create the business. Only sustained action creates results. And the intensity of your desire is completely irrelevant if it doesn't translate into intensity of action. Seneca practiced something he called execution audit. He regularly compared what he had planned to do versus what he had actually done. Not to punish himself, but to see with brutal clarity the gap between intention and execution. Because that gap is where self-deception lives. It's easy to convince yourself you're making progress when you think about your intentions. Impossible to deceive yourself when you compare intentions with real actions. The list of what you actually did doesn't lie. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that talking about your plans frequently sabotages executing them. When you talk about what you'll do, you get a social reaction that feels like a reward. Your brain experiences satisfaction similar to having done the thing, and that premature satisfaction reduces the motivation to actually do the work. That's why people who constantly talk about their plans rarely execute them. They already got the emotional reward of the announcement. The real work now is just a cost without additional emotional benefit. You can implement this through the practice of executive silence. When you decide to do something significant, don't announce it. Don't talk about it. Just do it silently. Let your results speak after they exist. This eliminates the premature reward of social reaction and keeps all your motivation focused on real execution. And when you finally show results instead of intentions, the respect you receive is genuine, not social courtesy for your aspirations. Epictetus warned against what he called performative philosophy. People who speak eloquently about virtue but live without it. Who can debate ethics for hours but act unethically. Who know all the theories about the good life but don't live well. Their knowledge is intellectual entertainment, not real transformation. And in the end, it doesn't matter how much they knew. It only matters how they lived. Life doesn't reward knowledge. It rewards the application of knowledge through consistent action. The practice of focusing on execution over intention also eliminates much unnecessary suffering. When you focus on intentions, you torture yourself with the gap between what you want and what you have. When you focus on execution, you simply do the work. There's no space for drama about how much you desire the result. There's only space for the next action that brings you closer to it. Desire without action is suffering. Action without need for intense desire is productive peace. Seneca wrote, "It's the quality of life, not the duration, that matters." And quality doesn't come from how much you planned or how much you wanted. It comes from what you actually did, from how many times you acted when you didn't want to, from how many days you executed when you didn't feel motivated. from how many times you bled, sweated, and continued when it would have been easier to give up. That brutal and consistent execution is the only thing that builds a quality life. Marcus Aurelius faced constant temptation to stay in the world of plans and ideas. He was a philosopher who loved contemplation, but he forced himself into action because he understood that contemplation without action is intellectual masturbation. That thinking without doing is entertainment. That planning without executing is fantasy, and that his value as emperor wasn't in how much he thought, but in how much he did. His meditations aren't plans of what he'll do. They're reflections on what he did and how to do it better. The brutal question you must ask yourself is, if someone judged your life based only on your actions during the last month, without knowing your intentions or plans, what would they conclude about your priorities? If you say you value health, but actions show you never exercise, your actions tell the truth. If you say you value relationships, but actions show you never invest time in them, your actions reveal reality. Your intentions are what you tell yourself. Your actions are who you really are. Epictetus summarized this with devastating simplicity. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. But reaction isn't a thought, it's an action. It's not what you think about the situation, it's what you do in response to it. You can think all kinds of virtuous thoughts about how you should respond, but only your real action counts. And that action is completely under your control, regardless of circumstances. Seneca also practiced something he called simulated death, to generate urgency about execution. He regularly visualized that he had only 1 month to live. In that context, would he keep postponing? Would he keep planning endlessly? Would he keep waiting to be ready? No. He would immediately execute the most important things. And then he asked himself, if that's what I do with 1 month remaining, why not do it now when perhaps I have 1 month remaining without knowing it? Marcus Aurelius wrote something that summarizes this perfectly. Discard opinion, and you will have saved yourself. Who prevents you from discarding it? The opinion you must discard is that your intentions matter without execution, that your plans have value without implementation, that your desires count without corresponding action. Discard that opinion. Recognize the brutal truth. Only execution counts. Only action generates results. Only sweat, blood, sustained effort day after day builds a life that works. In the end, you can live in the beautiful world of noble intentions and perfect plans. You can spend decades thinking about what you'll do, planning how you'll do it, wanting to do it, and reach the end, having done nothing. Or you can abandon the comfort of intentionality and enter the discomfort of execution. You can trade perfect planning for imperfect action. You can sacrifice the fantasy of what you'll do for the reality of what you're doing. The first option feels better moment to moment. The second builds a real life. And when you're on your deathbed, you won't remember your intentions. You'll remember what you actually did. The times you acted when it was difficult. The moments where you executed despite fear. The days where you bled, sweated, and continued. That's the only thing that counts. That's the only thing that creates a life without regrets. The awakening. When you finally stop negotiating with your own weakness, you've reached the end of these 10 truths. But if you think the end of these words means the end of the work, you've completely misunderstood. These truths aren't information to consume and archive. They're mirrors that reflect with brutal precision exactly how you've been living. And if you're honest, If you really look at what these mirrors show, you probably see patterns you'd prefer not to see. You see how many times you've obeyed weak emotions. You see how many days you've negotiated your surrender. You see how many opportunities you've lost waiting to feel ready. You see the massive gap between your intentions and your execution. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind adapts and converts into its own purpose the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Everything these truths have exposed, every destructive pattern, every avoidance mechanism, every way your emotions have controlled you, all of that isn't evidence that you're a lost cause. It's exactly the material you build strength from. It's the impediment that becomes the way, but only if you stop running from it and start working with it. There's a moment in the life of every person who wants to really change where they must make a definitive decision. Not a temporary decision you make when you feel motivated and forget when motivation disappears. A permanent decision that defines who you are, regardless of how you feel. That decision is: stop negotiating with your own weakness. Stop seeking exceptions. Stop rationalizing. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. And start living according to the principles you claim to value, no matter what emotions are present. Epictetus taught that there are only two types of people: those who are governed by their passions and those who govern them. Most people live in the first category without even realizing it. They believe they're making conscious decisions when they're really being dragged by emotions they don't control. They look at their life and can't explain why it's where it is, because they never recognized they weren't directing. They were being directed. The second category requires constant work. It requires vigilance over your own reactions. It requires a discipline that never ends. But it's the only way to live free. The transformation these truths can generate isn't magical or instantaneous. You won't read this and tomorrow be completely different. But you can begin a process today that, sustained for months, will turn you into an unrecognizable person. A person who no longer obeys every emotion. A person who doesn't wait for motivation to act. A person who faces discomfort without fleeing. A person who executes without excuses. That process begins with a single decision. Today, now, I choose to live according to truth instead of according to feelings. Seneca practiced reviewing his life with a simple but devastating question. Did I live today as a person I respect? Not, did I accomplish everything? Not, was it a perfect day? But, were the decisions I made today decisions I respect? Did I act with integrity when it would have been easier not to? Did I fulfill commitments to myself when I felt tempted to break them? That question, answered honestly each night, is all you need to stay on course, because it forces you to face the gap between who you say you are and who you really were today. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "It is the power of the mind to be invincible." But that power isn't a gift some have and others don't. It's a muscle everyone can develop through repeated use. Every time you act according to principles despite contrary emotions, you exercise that muscle. Every time you resist an impulse you know doesn't serve you, you strengthen it. Every time you do the difficult when you could have chosen the easy, you build invincibility. Not the invincibility of never feeling doubt or fear, the invincibility of acting effectively while those feelings are present. Before closing this completely, you need to do more than listen. You need to declare a commitment that goes beyond this moment of clarity. Go to the comments now and write, I stop negotiating with my weakness. From today, I choose according to principles, not according to feelings. That public declaration is your line in the sand. It's the moment where you pass from passive consumer of information to active participant in your own transformation. It's where you stop being a tourist of philosophical ideas and become a practitioner of the examined life. Do it now. Pause this audio. Go to the comments. Write, I stop negotiating with my weakness. From today, I choose according to principles, not according to feelings. That act of declaration makes your commitment real in a way that private thinking never achieves. The Stoics understood the power of public vows. They knew that when you declare your intention externally, you create an accountability that dramatically strengthens your capacity to fulfill it. Epictetus taught that philosophy isn't an academic profession, it's a life practice. You don't study Stoicism to impress people with your knowledge. You practice it to live better. And practicing means applying these truths in small daily decisions. It means that tomorrow morning, when your mind begins the negotiation of why you should stay in bed, you recognize the negotiation and act according to the principle of discipline instead of according to the feeling of laziness. It means that when you feel the impulse to procrastinate, you observe the impulse and work anyway. It means every small decision becomes a practice of these truths. Seneca wrote in his final days something that summarizes everything. Life is very short for those who forget the past, ignore the present, and fear the future. Don't forget what you've seen in these truths about how you've been living. Don't ignore the present you have now to begin living differently. Don't fear the future that will require sustained effort. Simply act today. In the next decision you face, choose according to principle instead of according to feeling. And then do the same in the decision after that, and after that. Marcus Aurelius never promised that living according to these principles would be easy. He promised it would be the only thing worth doing. That a life lived according to virtue, according to reason, according to consciously chosen principles instead of emotions that control you unconsciously, is the only life that generates deep satisfaction, not the superficial pleasure that evaporates. The satisfaction that comes from knowing you lived with integrity, that you faced your fears, that you fulfilled your commitments to yourself, that you became a person you respect instead of remaining a person you barely tolerate. The path forward is simple but not easy. Identify one truth of the 10 that most confronted you, the one that generates the most resistance when you think about applying it. That's exactly the truth you must begin with, because it's where you have the most weakness to strengthen. Commit to practicing that truth specifically for the next 30 days. Not all truths simultaneously. One truth. 30 days of consistent practice. After 30 days, that practice will be an established habit. Then you add the second truth. Then the third. Epictetus warned, it's impossible for someone to begin learning what they think they already know. If you finish this thinking, I already knew all that, you've completely missed the point. Knowledge without application is entertainment. You've been entertained but not transformed. The question isn't whether you knew these truths intellectually. The question is whether you live them behaviorally. And if the honest answer is no, then you didn't really know them. You only knew the words that described them. Seneca practiced something you can adopt. At the end of each week, review the 10 truths. For each one, ask yourself honestly, did I live according to this truth this week, or did I violate it? Be specific, not vague generalities, concrete instances. On Tuesday, I violated the third truth when I waited for motivation instead of acting. On Thursday, I lived the sixth truth when I resisted the impulse to give up. This weekly review keeps the truths active in your consciousness instead of allowing them to fade into oblivion after initial enthusiasm. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Those who do not observe the movements of their own minds will necessarily be unhappy." These 10 truths have shown you the specific movements of your mind that keep you trapped. Now that you see them, you have a responsibility. You can't pretend ignorance. You can't say, "I didn't know why my life doesn't work." You know exactly why. You know exactly what patterns you must change. You know exactly what truths you must practice. The only thing left is to decide whether you will. Modern culture will offer you 1,000 distractions from this work, 1,000 ways to avoid confronting these uncomfortable truths, 1,000 rationalizations for why you can't begin now. Your own mind will generate creative arguments for why these truths don't apply to your specific situation. And if you believe them, if you allow those distractions and rationalizations to divert you, you'll be in exactly the same place in a year. Same patterns, same excuses, same gap between who you could be and who you are. Epictetus was brutal with students who constantly found reasons not to practice. How much longer will you postpone demanding the best from yourself? That question applies directly now. How much longer will you postpone living according to these truths? How many more years will you waste obeying weak emotions? How many more decades will you spend negotiating with your own weakness? You don't have unlimited time. No one does. And each day you postpone is a day where you could have been strengthening exactly what you most need to strengthen. Seneca closed his life with a final action that demonstrated everything he taught. When ordered to commit suicide, he did so with perfect calm. No drama, no resistance, no negotiation. He simply executed what circumstance required with complete dignity, not because he didn't value life, because he valued virtue more. And until his last moment, he lived according to principles instead of according to emotions. That's the standard. Not that you should commit suicide, but that until your last moment, you choose who you are instead of being chosen by your feelings. Marcus Aurelius ended his meditations without a dramatic conclusion, simply another reflective entry about living well, because he understood this work never ends. There's no point where you finally made it and no longer need to practice. The practice is the achievement. The daily effort of choosing principles over passions is the triumph. There's no final destination where you rest permanently. There's only a perpetual present where you constantly choose who you'll be in this moment. Your emotions are your prison. That's the truth that began this journey. But now you've seen exactly how you built that prison bar by bar through years of obeying feelings instead of commanding them. And you've also seen that you have the keys. Each truth you heard is a key that opens a specific lock. But keys don't open anything by themselves. You must use them. You must turn them. You must push the door. You must walk outside even when every fiber of your being wants to stay in the familiar comfort of the cell. Real freedom isn't the absence of difficult emotions. It's the capacity to act effectively while those emotions are present. It's not never feeling fear. It's acting courageously while fear is present. It's not never feeling lazy. It's working disciplinedly while laziness is present. It's not never feeling doubt. It's moving forward confidently while doubt is present. That's the freedom these truths offer. Not the elimination of feelings, but mastery over whether those feelings control you. This is your moment. There's no other. There's no better time coming. There's no future version of you who will be more prepared. There's only this present moment where you can choose to begin living according to truth instead of according to feelings, where you can stop negotiating with your weakness and start building real strength, where you can transform the intellectual knowledge of these truths into the behavioral practice that transforms your life. Your emotions were your prison. But from today, if you choose to practice these truths, they can become simply the weather you observe while you walk free toward who you're really capable of being. The choice, as always, is completely yours. But now it's a conscious choice. You can no longer pretend you didn't know. You know exactly what to do. It only remains to decide whether you'll do it. Stop negotiating with your weakness. From today, choose according to principles, not according to feelings. That's not an inspirational phrase. It's a declaration of war against the weak version of you that has controlled your life too long. And if you declare that war and fight it every day, in every small decision, you'll win. Not magically, not easily, but inevitably and completely, because you're finally using the power you always had but never exercised, the power to choose who you are, regardless of how you feel. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, if you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.